Good evening, everybody. My name is John, and I'm the director here at the Flag Art Foundation. I want to welcome you all to tonight's panel discussion featuring artists Greg Carideo, Naudline Pierre, and Rose Salane, all of whom are in the group show As Above, So Below that currently surrounds you. As Above, So Below is part of a series of group exhibitions that I make every 3 or so years, which asks the question, what does it mean to believe or to want to believe in objects? This is also a show very much about the second life of objects, what happens to things when they're separated from their original owners. It's also a show about being presented with information that may run counter to what you're actually seeing in space, or about the power of a narrative to provide an artwork with a different kind of gravity. For example, the Charles Ledre over here, this little daisy chain, is carved out of human bone, which completely changes the gravity of the piece. So I think a lot of the pieces in the show have that kind of similar story to them. Before we jump into tonight's conversation, I'm going to do intros and bios, abridged versions for everyone over here, and I'll go alphabetically. Greg Carideo was born in 1986 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and lives and works in New York. He received a BFA from Minneapolis College of Art and Design and an MFA from NYU. Recent solo exhibitions include Groundwork at the Public Gallery in London, Nave in Lou in Los Angeles, which I saw in person, Dog-Eared Reverie, Foreign and Domestic in New York, Storefront at Fall River Mocha in Fall River, Massachusetts, and fun fact, the director of Fall River Museum of Contemporary Art, Harry Goldholder Harvey IV, is featured in a painting just outside of that door. So I like that there's echoes and relationships. He's the recipient of the Jerome Foundation Emerging Artist Fellowship and the Samuel May Rudin Fellowship. Naudline Pierre was born in 1989 in Leominster, Massachusetts, and lives and works in Brooklyn. Pierre received an MFA from the New York Academy of Art and a BFA from Andrews University in Barron Springs, Michigan. Recent solo exhibitions include The Mythic Age at James Cohan, This Is Not All There Is at the Drawing Center, New York, Enter the Realm at James Cohan as well, and What Could Be has not yet appeared at the Dallas Museum of Art in 2021. Also in 2021, Pierre was featured in Prospect 5 New Orleans. She's participated in the 2019-2020 Studio Museum Artist Residency Program and was exhibited in a 3-person show at MoMA PS1 as a culmination. In 2026, a survey exhibition of Pierre's will be traveling to 2 yet-to-be-announced American institutions, so stay tuned. Rose Salane was born in 1992 in Queens and lives and works in New York. Salane earned a BFA from Cooper Union and a Master's of Urban Planning at the City College of New York. And we'll get back to that transition because I'm also fascinated by it. Recent solo exhibitions include Periphery in Red, Yellow, and Blue at the IFA at NYU, Fissure or Eclipse, the Athenaeum, Lamar Dodd School of Art at the University of Georgia, Athens, 8 Vows, Tank in Shanghai, China, Basins of Attraction at Carlos Ishikawa in London, among others. She was awarded a Paula Krasner Foundation grant in 2022 and has lectured extensively across the United States, including at Yale, MIT, UPenn, and School of Visual Arts in New York. I've known Greg's work since 2021, when I saw fantastic solo shows of his at Grimm Gallery in New York downtown. Naudline has been a longtime friend of the Foundation's, and this is her third time showing with us. And I first encountered Rose's work in 2022 at Carlos Ishikawa's booth at Frieze, New York, through a beautiful piece titled 60 Detected Rings. I just want to say that I've been fans of all of you and your practices for a very long time, and I'm thrilled to have you here tonight, but I'm also more thrilled to that I've had to live with the work for 3 months now. So thank you for all participating. Just keep going. Tonight's conversation will be about 45 minutes long, followed by Q&A. Please feel free to take a look around the show after the talk, ask me and my team questions back there, and be sure to check out Anna Benaroya's solo show on our 10th floor. Also opening today is our new Spotlight artwork, which is right out this side of the store on that brick wall, or that brick red wall. It's a new painting by Sarah Flores, who will represent Peru at the 2026 Venice Biennale. All right, I'm just going to kind of start with a general question. Would each of you describe your work in this exhibition and where it fits into your overall practices? Let me start with Naudline.
Hello, I'm Naudline. I would describe that work as an object, a painting, a sculpture, a memory. And I think that it sort of brings the three-dimensional element of this world that I'm exploring that's not this world that we're in, and it sort of brings it to my reality, my current reality, and it serves as like an anchor to this other world that I'm always trying to get into.
Thank you. Rose?
The works that are in the exhibition are actually right behind us here, and they're a series of photographs that I've taken of confetti that I collect that is thrown outside of the City Hall door where you get married in downtown Manhattan. And it was a ritual I was doing for myself for quite some time because I am from New York and I always have these sort of love-hate relationships with the city I grew up in. And then I was fascinated by this door that constantly had these accumulations of glitter and confetti, and just kind of seeing something so bureaucratic and have this sparkle of just abstraction and energy. And I started to collect them over time, and I would categorize them. So each photograph is a different day of accumulative people's marriages in the form of confetti. And I find this way of documenting the objects I work with quite fascinating and fun because I get to work in a series of different mediums. It's not just the object itself, but then it's the photograph. And it leads me into other questions too, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah. Sarah?
Thanks, John. These are my works right here on these two walls. They fit into my work quite well because I've been making a series of sculptures in this realm for the past 5 years or so. They are all architectural sculptures that compose found materials that I have gathered in New York and all over the place, in fact. The structures are based on architectural features of the city, of specific aspects of the place that I think kind of like teach us about the city. Awnings are a through line through all of this work. So the awning as a form of shelter, the way it correlates to the body, a general sense of place in a larger sense. Most of the objects shelter something inside. The one on the right has a shoe heel that I found on the street, which I've been collecting for 11 years. I've been picking up shoe heels off the ground for a long time and have hundreds of them at this point.
Which are also like arranged beautifully on the door of your studio.
Yes. And yeah, a lot of the material that I build into the sculptures is clothing. That clothing is pulled from barbed wire fences. It's pulled up from the dirt. A lot of it is mine as well. The yellow curtains that hang from that piece are an old pillowcase of mine. And the work always correlates to the body by both connecting in terms of size, scale, but it quite literally suggests the body. The black awnings of that piece are the shoulders of a T-shirt. Yeah.
When you say for the past 5 years you've been kind of working in this style, what was the impulse? Was it a found object? Was it kind of architectural armature? Like I'm fascinated in terms of the piece on the left was made new for the exhibition. The piece on the right, I believe, is maybe 2 years old?
Yeah, about a year old.
Okay. But I think I'm fascinated in terms of like how you reached this form. Mm-hmm. It's a very specific, but also very meticulously made object. I think they also navigate in terms of like carousels and doll houses, and there's also like this kind of magical miniature world in them as well. Mm-hmm. And kind of at the Holy of Holies, they often contain this found piece. Can you kind of also just talk about like the genesis, like what was the first piece that kind of begat the style that you're working in right now?
Yeah, well, my work always begins with observation. I am a collector of sorts, in both in physically collecting objects and materials, but also collecting things that I can't physically move, and I do that in the form of photographs. So my cell phone is my collecting tool for the most part. I take photos constantly, and it is generally my note-taking device as well as my sketchbook. Awnings were one of many, many things that I've been photographing for 10 years. I oftentimes look for archetypal things that somehow are in front of, are quite obvious, but are also overlooked, that teach me about the place that I live. Also kind of like teach me about people in a sense, so like really inform both the community and the environment. Awnings are so archetypal to the city. They're not just in New York, but they are one of the most common features of New York, I find. So much so that corporate entities, corporate shops in New York have to like adapt to the style of New York and get these bodega style awnings. So, I mean, I'm not from here, I'm from Minneapolis. I've lived here for a long time, and I was fascinated by the fact that Burger King gets a vinyl awning in New York and Subway gets a vinyl awning. It is the vernacular of the place. But that vernacular actually belongs to the people. The awning is this form of self-representation in New York. It is a way for businesses to tell us like who they are, what their vibe is, what they have inside, and then beyond that, beyond the form of representation that they are, they teach us about time and disintegrate and break down and have this relationship to natural progress in a sense. So it's like they're just so multifaceted, and I have a lot of things like that in my life where I'm looking for things like that. So the awning, the first time I made one, I made it because it related to art. It's not just what it is conceptually. Awnings had this like direct relationship with painting and with sculpture. It is a form that is voluminous, but it is empty. I love that about them. They are image-based objects, which is also something that I've been interested in forever. I'm always looking for objects that perform as both images and forms. So I made one because I didn't want to transport one, obviously. I couldn't do it, but I also wanted to convey the intimacy that I feel that you might like feel under an awning, or like the intimacy you feel with something like really personal. So that's how they got small, and they immediately connected to my body because I mean, the first one I made had a t-shirt in it, and it was pulled from my closet. It was the most immediate material I had. Yeah.
Awesome. I think architecture becomes a really interesting way into the show. I've worked at Flag for 11 years. I love a group exhibition, as many of you know. And I think kind of entering this space for this show, it's kind of the clearest way off the elevator that I've ever started a show. It starts with the Roman arch. By the time you get to this wall, it becomes the Gothic arch. I like that you have the Roman and the Gothic in this room on either side. And it starts in this really kind of polished way, and then by the end of the space, it gets really kind of like handmade, and there's a lot of like duct tape and luck back there. I think one of the first pieces also when I was considering the show was Naudline's, which is a beautiful little reliquary on a CNC cut metal base that has flames on it.
Yeah.
I think like I've known the work for a long time through painting. And the two paintings that we've shown over the years have been they're like larger than me. They've been big pieces. The first was a triptych, which also has connotations to, I would say, spirituality as well. But they're populated in the space of seraphims and devils and all kinds of things. Talk to me about where this work fits into the practice, and also like the move to go three-dimensional. Because I think they always feel like portals, but then when you start bringing in architecture, and I think like the gate becomes a portal, or even in the last show with James Cohan with the kind of architectural elements kind of in the spaces. I guess my question is arches, portals, paintings, go.
The answer is yes.
Great.
I wanted to make a painting that could stand and be seen from all sides, and my sort of three-dimensional language started with the idea of a gate and having that open and available for people to walk through and kind of imagine themselves as something different on the other side. And from there, I thought, all right, like maybe I make these sort of containers for a person's self or ideas or wishes or whatever. And of course, it's borrowing from, religious iconography and sort of remixing it for my own use. But that's where that sort of shape came from. And that was the first time I painted on like a 3D printed, kind of thing. That one's, I think, MDF, I'm sorry. There was another one in the show that was 3D printed. Okay. But I made some works like that were like life-size, and I wanted to kind of make a small jewel-like one. And then I thought, well, they need a plinth, and I don't want to just put it on any plinth. And I had already begun working with the hot roll steel, and so I decided to make my drawings into sculptures. And so I feel like the plinth, though it is a three-dimensional object, to me it's a drawing, and it just kind of woke up and then got off the page and became what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's like not a question, it's more of like a compliment. But I think you handle scale shifts really well. I think there's something about a large painting that feels like it could consume you, and then there's something about a small reliquary out there that like is an audience of one. I think so much of what the show is about is close looking, so I really like the idea of kind of like an intimate gesture. Again, to get to the heel at the back of Greg's piece, like you have to change your body a little bit, you have to position yourself, you have to navigate it. What's fascinating, Rose, about your work is, and again, I've loved it for a long time, I think the Pompeii series about returning stones was, I'm fascinated by how your mind works. And it was a late invitation, and I'm so glad you said yes. So I think this is one of those things where it's like, if people look at the checklist, each of these has a title, which is the date. And then there's a little bit more of an explanation. But I think it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about, like, I go through the show and I think it's like each of these represents a day's kind of ceremonies that are supposed to represent these chapters. Whether it's a great chapter or not, it represents kind of like going from one stage to another. Certain days have like better colors, certain things are more glamorous. And I like the idea that you are both a witness to and a like caretaker for an ephemeral gesture. How, through walking, how many days did you, like in the entirety of the series, because I know you also keep the objects themselves, will that change over time in terms of like how you conceptualize the series? Does series grow with you? Lots of weird, I don't know.
No, yeah. I mean, this, I've been thinking about this idea of evidence. And I think that there's a lot of stages with collecting and the relationships that we hold to the collections that we amass. The way that I enter into a collection or I begin a collection is through an interest that begins at a site or a repetition through a place. And these photographs, for me at least, are evidence of that collection, and then we hold it in time through photography, and then what I would hope to do is show it in the physical realm. And in the physical realm, it might be more chaotic with sculpture, but also having these markers that are, no one would understand if they didn't have the title that this was specific to the City Hall, and this is a collection of confetti from, the one I'm looking at straight in the middle is from Valentine's Day 2023. Like that the context isn't in that photograph, but I'm making that record possible, and that is documented through my routine of going there and also witnessing a place and do this act or enable this contact and interaction. And these intimacies that are constantly fleeting happen in cities like New York or very hyper cities so frequently. And I find it, like I was mentioning in the beginning, these ways of documenting these very minute experiences through photography, through film, through, just collecting the object itself are definitely my fascination points with the collection. And the series is ongoing. I think it could be perpetual. We could have a whole room full of them, of like boxes of confetti, for example. And I think it's for me, it's interesting to describe a time period through this debris. And the beauty in the kind of interaction between the bureaucracy and then the subjectivity and then love.
Yeah, it's interesting. The piece behind me with the purple, it's a work by Sophie Calle. It says, "David is dead, and because I have no words to describe him, if you lift the curtain, there's a photo." What I find fascinating about Sophie is because she's constantly an element of the story. For me, she almost becomes an untrustworthy narrator, which I think for me makes the work more interesting because I don't quite trust her. How do you think about yourself as kind of the editor, narrator? You're providing a narrative, you're becoming an author, you're also an artist. Where does your subjectivity and editing come into kind of these larger series?
I mean, I think, I have personal affinity towards places towards the sites that I deal with if I had an experience there or I've watched other experiences happen there. I like to say that I'm an usherer. I'm more, maybe not necessarily an author, or I like to show these perspectives and be able to provide access to these perspectives. And I think that's, being an artist, that's the privilege we have. Also, if the practice is, generous enough to let people in and do that, it's like, double the fun or something. But I mean, maybe specifically maybe I'll just describe the Pompeii series that you mentioned in the beginning, where I'm often given access to archives and I am asked to do some project with an archive. And I was able to go to the Archaeological Park of Pompeii in 2023, and they gave me access to their backroom storage, which they said that there was a box of these mailed letters from tourists in the park, And I'm sure, maybe people are familiar with this because it's becoming more frequent that this action happens, and the news has been reporting on it. But essentially, tourists take little fragments of the archaeological park and then they return them. And they return them by way of sending the object. Could be a little fragment of, could be anything from like a piece of dirt to like a little mosaic that they wiggled out of the ground. And they write a letter of apology. And they'll often say, I'm sorry for taking this. Could you please return it? And when they showed me this box of these items that they couldn't put back in their, respective places that they were taken from, and they were like, we don't really know what to do, because essentially these objects are imposters to the archive.
Yeah.
And they take a place and they make a fragment of a place, and that fragment becomes a different whole. And that's a good example of what I try to do within my practice, is show that, we enter places and we leave them, and then they leave with us. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by, because a lot of the letters also have an element of guilt. Like, people felt guilty for taking something. But I think there's something interesting about, if you walk on the beach and pick up a stone, if you're in Pompeii and you see a bit of terracotta or a mosaic piece, if you're on the street and you see a heel, I think there's something kind of wonderful. I mean, it's kind of counter to the guilt of returning a piece, but I still think there's something wonderful about, like, of everyone that walks by this thing, like, you saw it. Like, you saw the magic in this heel, you saw the magic in this confetti, someone saw the magic in, like, taking a piece of history with them. I don't know, I think, like, so much of this show is about, like, wanting to believe that those objects have meaning, because I think if those things have meaning, like, maybe we do. And I think to document that, or to enshrine that, or to make a portal to another world to suggest that, like, maybe, like, you can walk both directions. I think there's something really beautiful about that.
Can I jump
Yeah.
in? I think part of what gives that meaning is repetition, of course. And when I think about Rose's piece here, I think about the repetition of this occurrence, which somehow doesn't take it away. It doesn't take anything away from the individual act people experience outside of the courthouse, but collectively it takes away from the material. Like, the material is meaningless in a sense, especially when you see that it is just material that serves a function, a temporary function.
A stand-in for.
Yeah, and when it's so interesting when you get clued into that form of, when you get clued into something and then it repeats itself over and over. I think about you seeing this stuff all the time. It becomes both meaningful and meaningless, like, it has the dual effect. For me, the first few heels I collected, it was such a phenomenon that it felt like a phenomenon that this could happen, and that somebody wouldn't know it happened, and they're like leaving something behind that is so, I don't know, kind of like integral to their life. But then it becomes like the meaning changes over and over and over. Yeah.
Well, again, I think it's like when things are separated from their original owners or their original functions, like, what happens to them? What do we think about them? The pieces behind you, we collected from eBay for the show, so these are just ephemera. These are the third-class Catholic relics, sourced for $10 and $15 a piece. Each of them, you can see, like, behind Greg's head, there's like a little hole, and there's like a little hole down here. Each of them contain a piece of fabric that may or may not have touched the bones of a saint, a martyr, or someone considered religious or special. And I love the idea that these would have been bought from the church. You would have kept them on your body, on your bedside table, in your purse. And your proximity to something that has proximity to something else connotes some kind of beneficence or luck or or something. And again, I think it's that want to believe. I think it's like, again, I think so much of the show is about traces, and I think each one of your works deals with that really quite beautifully and differently. What I love about a group exhibition like this is like none of it actually kind of makes sense together. Like none of these objects came into the world with the expectation to be seen next together. They also will never again. So I like the idea for 3 months of a show, you get to create by proximity kind of a certain kind of context or magic. I think magic is also something that kind of plays into this as well. And Naudline, I think like magic and magical realism and spirituality really infuses the works, the paintings, the sculptures, and everything in between. Are the characters coming from a specific place? Have you developed your own kind of echelon of characters at this point? Are there certain characters that you return to at different times? How do you look at narrative in there? And then also, like, where do you start the work? I think they have this kind of falling, tumultuous, almost like Tiepolo kind of space. So I'd be fascinated to know in 2 ways. Who are the characters? Do they repeat? Are they people? Do they represent people? And also just like, where do you start?
Yeah, I consider myself like a steward, and my purpose is to allow them to be known. And in this sort of mythology, these characters appear to me in ways that I can understand. So they take the likeness of a sort of human, bird-like kind of mix, but they are so much bigger than that. But they're like dumbing it down for me out of, love or whatever. They want to take care of me, and so they're like, here, go pay your rent. But the characters, they come from somewhere I really don't know. But being like a vessel and a guardian for them, it's not my business to know. I'm just like, hey, I'm here, I'm your servant, let me know what you need. And it becomes a collaboration between myself, the materials, and these characters that honestly are like blessing me with their presence. And so I think there is like a repetition. Some of these characters repeat, some of them morph, some of them have grown from the time they appeared to where they are now, and they will continue to grow. But every work, I think, starts with like a feeling. And of course, there's like all of this sort of connection to art history in a certain time period in art history, which I find very like bizarre because, it just took a lot of imagination to kind of think about what, these religious stories and myths and what that could look like. They didn't have photography, they didn't have film, they didn't have all of those like touch points where we've seen everything that's ever been. We have so many references. And so I kind of enjoy looking at works like that because I'm like, you had to be crazy to make these images and also like really believe something and believe in a fantasy. And I think that to me is the most powerful part, is the belief in the fantasy, and it's imagination allowing room for something new to come through and like to imagine into something else.
Yeah. And also to allow, I think, that fantasy to be a little bit like overwhelming too.
Oh yeah. It's overwhelming to me all the time.
Rose, I'm also just fascinated, like, to go from fine art to urban planning. What was that pivot?
It's not really a pivot.
Okay.
But it was just because just very, candidly, I went to Cooper Union for 4 years, which is I was in the art school, it was an art conservatory in many ways, and we had such a heavy conceptual art education. And that was I just really wanted to do more theory, more urban theory. I was really interested, I remember, in writing about the change that happened in the early 2000s from the dot-com bomb to like post 9/11, and growing up just through that. And that was my goal, to write about this era, also to understand it a bit more through, I guess, a little bit city and city policy things, and work with this professor, Michael Sorkin, who's an amazing writer. If anyone has interest in reading about that era of New York City, he has beautiful books on that. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I think it's additive for the practice for sure. I am always open to like, jumping into different fields, because I think the practice that I have is like very just sweepingly curious, and I would love to understand more information and get involved in more sections of knowledge. But yeah, I think if that explains the question. It's urban planning was a way of me just making sure I could do some writing properly, because I remember in art school not having that time to write when I'm thinking through the physical making.
And then I think education is always an interesting question. Both my parents were educators. My dad he taught PE, he was a guidance counselor, and then he was the principal of my high school. And my mom taught special ed, and they were both at my prom. And they were the first generation in their family that went to school and chose like 35-year job, retirement, pension. Last generation, I think, that actually had that option. They had 3 kids. I'm the youngest of 3. All of us were incredibly creative, but that creativity was clipped when we started looking at college. I think they wanted us to be as creative as kids, but not creative as adults, let alone artists. So I think like a question that I'm perennially interested is what level of support to kind of pursue kind of an artistic career or an art education did you all have? Or not? Ta-da!
The question is...
was you kind of being a creative who then would go on to pursue your education in arts? How was your family with that?
Complicated.
Okay.
I mean, it's very supportive at first, and then they see the reality of it,
Okay.
I mean, but more so, like I think they see the reality of like what you're doing. It's not necessarily the reality of life, a financial reality. That is not as big of a problem that a parent has, I think, compared to like how you actually spend your time, which is a bigger problem. In America, especially, I mean, it is like teaching people. Part of the role of an artist is perhaps teaching people that are showing that you can live a different kind of life, that your daily activities are dictated by different forces, and I still find myself like falling into the habit of of trying to like climb out of a hole with my family, like always over-explaining.
Sure.
But they were supportive. Yeah.
At the beginning, no. I was on a very different track. I was sort of a science med kind of thing. And I wasn't really looking to be an artist. I didn't even imagine it to be something. But were
you drawing at that point?
I was drawing.
Okay.
I had like a little secret folder of drawings, and that was it. And when I went to college, that was kind of like the first time I had a little bit of space to think about who I am and what I want. And so I just took a drawing class, just added it on to like my chemistry and whatever. And from there, it just became something bigger. And I think my family had a hard time understanding what I was trying to do, because I had to use my imagination. Like I had to imagine and be delusional and sort of like be like, well, I can do this. And they're like, well, what is this? And I'm like, I don't know yet, but but trust me, you know? So it took a handful of years for them to kind of understand, and now they're really supportive.
Lovely.
I think my family's been pretty supportive. I mean, like I didn't mention before, from growing up in New York, there's a lot of opportunities with starting young, getting into specialized high schools, getting into school for free if you are so lucky, Cooper Union at the time, and then I just was like, I want to do the urban planning thing. They were like, why? But they've always been very supportive, obviously hesitant, but I think we're able to like think together, which is good.
Nice.
I'm very grateful that I have parents that are, you know, despite where they're coming from two different places in the world, they trust me.
Okay. And then kind of a wrap-up question before we open this up to the audience. But Naudline, when we were in London maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, I don't know, time is so elastic lately, we had a conversation outside about like how maybe you wanted to curate a show, but the show might look very similar to this. What about these kind of themes like make you excited?
First of all, this is like my dream show. Like, I have peaked. Hopefully not, but like it kind of feels like that. I think that what I love about the curation here and like kind of weaseling into your mind is like the oddity and the sort of like reference to something that's familiar, but then it's like sort of perverse. And that's like my baseline. My baseline is like, take it, but like remix it and kind of make it like a little weird. I was gonna use another word, but I don't think it's appropriate. But I think what attracts me to this is that there's a clear connection to an art historical sort of like idea surrounding belief. Relics, pieces of things, ideas, whatever, symbols. And I think that's what's exciting to me. Like, how do people believe and what do they believe in? And you really can believe in anything.
100%.
So yeah.
On that, I think like let's open this up. Any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
You mentioned a couple times group show, you love group show, you love this group show. I'm wondering whether each of you found that other artists' work in the show was having either an interesting dialogue with your work or that it was somehow making you think about your work in a different way or maybe inspiring you to do your work in a different way. Because in theory, even though the curator suggested that these pieces shouldn't be together, hopefully there are commonalities that have caused a dialogue or inspiration, or do you look at your work in a different way? So I'm curious if any of that happened.
I really love these works behind us, even though they are from eBay. I just think it's something that, again, it's this like find and this, the way that you just put it in the show, I think is very bold and presents this, it's almost like this interesting risk and then also this, the relic. And it reminds me of the Pompeii works that I was just describing, and then these just tiny little droplets of potential faith, even though it's very Catholic and all of this. But this is something that reminded me of like, oh wow, like this is in a different ecosystem of, you know, it's on eBay, we're purchasing it as just, you know, from the seller to the, you know, buyer. And it enters into this conversation in a fascinating way for me, at least in this exhibition. But then also we have Felix Gonzalez Torres, which I'm such a fan of the puzzle piece in the other room. And I also think the way that you laid it out architecturally is very beautiful. How you were saying the arches and the different stages of the rooms and the colors as well in each room, like the paint of the walls, for instance.
I would just say to that point, and thanks for this. I've been with Flag for 11 years. I love what I get to do here. The more exhibitions we make, the more I learn that there's no rules whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like the idea is like you can put anything in space and to kind of create this narrative. So these were just, I find them intensely beautiful. And I love the story that like they've been removed once or twice. And you know, for $10 or $15 now you can have something that someone actually like believed in with all their heart. Like I find that process funny. But it's like the difference between these and then in the hallway there's 17th century Spanish reliquaries. There's the femur of St. Lawrence over there. And I mean like, again, it's wanting to believe. And I kind of like in the shows like this that you can do Ruche and kind of a different take on a text piece, which is simply a found ephemeral material right next to one another. And I also don't know where else I could do a show like this.
Right.
So I like the fact that we can like dig in, and I think progressively these are gonna just get like weirder and weirder and weirder.
I know you said that these works kind of don't connect.
On the surface.
On the
maybe.
surface,
Yeah.
we know, yes, on the surface. But I personally feel like in this show, like every single artwork I wish I made, and I think that's a really great, to me that means like I'm tapped into everything here, and like I connect to the images and the methods and whatever. So to answer your question, yes, it does make me excited to make work, and it kind of makes me feel like I belong and like I should just keep doing what I'm doing because there's space for that.
Yeah, I find it crazy to think that work doesn't connect in here. I mean, to me, it's like, it's almost as if the show was like commissioning all of this work to be made, you know? It connects so much that it freaks me out a little bit, you know? Like that my work becomes, I love Lucas Samaras, but I don't think about him that much, you know? And then when I see the Lucas Samaras next to my work, I'm like, has he been teaching me how to make work all this time? And that's why I made this? I'm a massive fan of Charles Ledre over here, and I mean, beyond it being an honor to show alongside
That's right,
him.
when you were installing, you guys
Oh my
met.
God,
Yeah.
I walked in and I saw him and I was like, that's gotta be him.
He's also like 6'7" with like
Yeah.
a waxed mustache.
Yeah.
Like it's a very like specific
Yeah,
like.
the only one in here, yeah. For him I see him contextualizing me. And I got to tell him a story of how I had this postcard of an artwork of his on my desk for like a decade when I was like 18 to whatever. So that image of his piece almost became, artworks also become, especially like in the day of postcards like that, they become kind of like relics, and they also like have an object meaning relationship. You carry the thing around, you set it up. I wish we still had that with shows. Like the postcard time was really nice.
I still have from when Murray Guy closed down.
Oh yeah.
They made postcards for every exhibition, and the last night, which was a crazy night, they just had all of them out on the table. So I took like I think 3 to 5 of each, because you're like, one's not enough, so I'm gonna take 3 or 5 of them.
Yeah,
so it's nice to still like look back on those and see like Alejandro Cesarco and all of these, Moira Davey.
Yeah, Moira
They mean
Davey,
something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I brought it up to him, and he remembered which postcard it was. Like he remembered all the postcards. One way of answering the question, though, is I think that the show, like beyond the idea, beyond the concept of curation here, I feel like a very general theme of the show is materiality. Just like material significance. Beyond the religious or significant meaning, it's just like how do we deal with material and like the material of our lives. Yeah, and it's kind of like a survey of different ways of doing it. I mean, I see Rose's work and I'm like, why do I make sculpture? I should make some photographs. Or like, and I've done that too, but I know why I'm making the sculptures now. It's like, yeah.
And I also want to say, I'm a big believer in like what mixed into the show is what was meant to be in the show, and what didn't happen for the show wasn't supposed to happen for the show. So I also want to say, like, Matt, Ben, Suyi, and Krista, like, thank you also. Like, they all have beautiful pieces in the show tonight, so like, stick around, talk to everybody. Any more questions?
I had a question.
Shoot.
I was fascinated, Rose, to hear you talk about your piece, and you mentioned that this work is from Valentine's Day, and it made me sort of think about how you organized your visits to that site to collect things, and wondered about your relationship to specific dates, and it got me thinking about how long the project went on, because you said it's still ongoing. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it was, well, there's one that's Valentine's Day, which is in the center. I did go on September 11th for several years. Like, this has been going on for 3 years now, I think, since I first saw the door emitting this debris at the end, or the confetti at the end of each day. It used to be a lot more frequent because I wanted to accumulate a lot of different, I wanted to accumulate 100 days of me going there and gathering. It became a bit more arbitrary when I would go to the site. But there was, I remember, I'm sure everybody remembers that like little earthquake that happened a year ago. I definitely tried to go then just to get like, these moments of these markers that end up in our periphery or end up, we just forget about them. And then I want to somehow engage the actual material into a really large installation. So that's why I was really going there like frequently. And I think I started also giving little piles to friends when they got married, or just like, as little keepsakes. And so the project has shifted a little bit more in a relaxed direction, but there will be a time where I show it in a big installation where you could just, imagine a big room, and the piles are kind of have plexiglass covers on top of them, and they're dated. And I think that'll give this really big impact of like, okay, wow, all these rituals of marriage that happened through this one door in New York City, the Manhattan Marriage Bureau.
Did anyone ever ask you what you were doing? Did anyone recognize you day after day?
No.
Okay.
It's because it's at the end of the day usually, because
Okay.
I don't really want to be in the cross section or crossfire of everybody leaving and being very happy. But no, it's at the end of the day. So then actually the awareness of maintenance comes up, and then I remember Meryl ukuleles and these artists that have these very amazing practices with the city and maintenance around that era of, I guess, the 70s and 80s, and how they insert themselves into that. Yeah, it's a meditation for me. It's like my way of being like, okay, again, like my relationship with New York can be, sort of evened out through doing this collection. And it's a curious thing. I probably should write about it a little bit, definitely insert it into this film that I'm making. So we'll see where it goes, but ongoing.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's say the questions at the same time. No, okay. I have a question for Greg. I wanted to know if you could talk about, especially in this piece, the right-hand side one, sort of like the tension between sort of like the ruse, like the sort of fabricated degradation of the structure in juxtaposition with like, to sort of speak about like the, time and the weathered aspects of the fabric, or like whether that's from, secretion, the sweat of your body, or the sunlight, or these things, and sort of, I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot about what could you say more about like that tension? Like, so why make the structure? Why go approach the structure in that way to sort of like mimic this thing that's naturally occurring in the awning? That's not like, it's not a problem. I'm just wondering more so about it.
I mean, I make the structures myself. I love making objects. I love making sculpture, and I love fabricating these things. The craft of an object is like, you know, something happens that you reach. There's something that's happening in your mind and body when you're making it that feels like very special. The structures are, I make the structures because they are essentially a way, form is a way to connect content. You know, like form is always a vehicle for content. And for me, form is literally like a space that can bring together all of these different time periods, materials, things that I find, and ideas. I mean, and so the structures, there is that relationship. Everything on the structure is found material. The structure is totally fabricated. The process that I like impose upon the structure, it feels like a way of engaging with a sense of time. Like it's like superimposing time on an object that needs it. Like the structure needs it. Everything else doesn't need it. I can find it. And I don't. There's something really wild about doing that process. It feels like you then like are out in the world and you see things and you're like, I did that. Like you see a fence and the way that a fence is breaking down and you're like, I've done that too. Like you're like connected with natural processes. It's also like, you know, I hate this word, but like it's the alchemy aspect of it. It's connected to something like biomorphic that I'm interested in that happens in making a sculpture. That piece right there, it's all copper. Very hard to weld copper. It's all brazed copper. It's oxidizing. All of the green parts are patina. That patina is created by fumigating the piece with ammonia. To do that, to make that piece the way that I did it, if any of you have like used ammonia, it's an intense material. To fumigate the piece, I made a coffin for the piece. Like I built a box that then became the crate to bring it here. So the carrying device was also like its deathbed even before I brought it to the show. But I had to build a box to fill up the box with ammonia, 2 gallons of ammonia, which is like absolutely mind-boggling, like what that does to your body. Penetrated 2 layers of goggles, ruined a mask of mine. To do that, I watched the piece like undergoing this experience. It's just really fascinating to like put something through that, you know, like an art object. I feel like sculpture is when you make something, you're creating a thing that you have a relationship with, and you're just like putting it through so much, you know? So that all feels like analogous to the material that I find. Like it's like, and I love that they coexist then.
Yeah. I saw the coffin. comment slash question is, I found it interesting in like answer to the Sophie Call unreliable narrator question of Rose, how do you see yourself, and you chose the word usher, which I thought was so interesting because if we're working with confetti that's left after a wedding, that's also a role in a wedding or a performance. And it's also, a present. It connotes some kind of presence, but also passivity and receiving. And I guess I was curious what the other artists on the panel would say about how they see their role.
Well, funnily enough,
Yeah.
we had a steward,
Yeah.
we had an usher.
Yeah.
You're the...
I say collaborator.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's actually a really nice way to wrap this up. All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming.